Warning, the following program is designed for casual wrestling fans and is meant purely for entertainment. If you're SAWFT, proceed at your own risk. Viewer discretion is advised.
Brother, I'm going run a wild Hulk Hogan. If all I get's a moment, I'll make sure it's an explosion. Cause lately I've been seeing stars, trying to kick out on this chokehold. But it's no holds barred, middle fingers like I'm Stone Cold.
What is good, everybody? We are back, excuse me, with another episode of the Slapping Meat Wrestling Podcast. It is the Friday solo episode. For those who are brand new to the channel or to the podcast, Tuesday nights, me and my co-host DJ Wavy D does an episode. Friday is just me doing what I initially started out doing with this podcast, and that's just ranting on the world of pro wrestling, giving my opinions and saying how I feel, and giving zero cares in the world about what the IWC has to think about it. We do this show for the casuals, by a casual, with the hope that you guys enjoy, and really I'm here to make you guys think from a different perspective about the world of wrestling, because I know that I have a very unique point of view of how I view the world of wrestling. We got a jammed packed show, for you all today. So let's get the housekeeping out the way. As always, go to the links in the description, and join the Discord. That's the most important thing you can do to support this, is join the Discord. You can vote on Thirsty Tuesdays. You can leave questions that will be asked on the show and answered on the show on Tuesdays, and all of that, but also build the community for us on that show, on that Discord link. Second thing is slappingmeatwrestling.com. You can get your merchandise at the slappingmeatwrestling.com. Again, that's slappingmeatwrestling.com. If you were a DJ Wavy D fanatic, you got some I'm a DJ Wavy D girl or DJ Wavy D guy shirts. If you're a WETOODEEP fanatic, you go support it that way. You can get the logo shirt for the podcast. You can get the Netflix and Tussle shirt, or you can get the Keep Calm and Slap Meat shirt. Again, that's slappingmewrestling.com. Final thing for housekeeping is like, share, subscribe to the podcast, to the audio as well. And so I have a favor. If you listen on YouTube, if you're watching the actual podcast and you haven't done this yet, go over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Those are the big two platforms. You could do it to both if you want. You could do it to one, whichever one you have. That's fine. Go over, follow or subscribe to that podcast there, and then leave a review. Right. At the same time, if you haven't subscribed and you're watching on YouTube, subscribe here. Leave us a like. Leave us a comment. That gets us in the algorithms. And then the same thing, if you're listening on audio and you have already given us that 5-star review and you followed or subscribed depending on the platform you're on, and you got the notifications and you've given us that review, what I need from you is to come to YouTube. Subscribe. That builds the subscriber base. But the most important is leave a like, leave a comment on the video. And if you could just do that every week, it takes 30 seconds. Doesn't have to be an in-depth comment could just be good episode, right? The more comments, the more likes, the more this gets put into the algorithms, and the bigger the show becomes. And then finally, if you need some new WWE merchandise or you're booking a vacation through Expedia, the affiliate links for the podcast are in the description as well. That's a long intro. It's a lot of housekeeping to get out of the way. Let's get into the actual thing you guys came here for, and that is wrestling content. So one of the things that I pride myself on is in building this community is the opportunity for the fans of the show to leave suggestions for topics that I talk about. I had zero intention of talking about this. I still don't necessarily think it's worth the time to talk about it, but because it was asked, I'll cover it. And I'm going to call this the next 30 seconds PC. Oh, no. And actually, I think it makes a little bit more sense as to what is happening in this story. Now that TNA went air yesterday night, and so I didn't watch TNA live. I'm honest with you, completely forgot about it. With a whole bunch of other things happening last night, completely forgot about it. But PCO, if you don't know about him, if you're a wrestling fan in the last 70 years, you know who PCO is, because the dude, I feel like he's been wrestling for like 50 years. The dude's in his 70s, still going strong, still doing crazy stunts. Essentially, the story is he went to a GCW event, apparently went into business for himself and smashed the Digital Media Championship. Apparently, he's done with TNA because they came out yesterday. I saw the segment, where Steph DeLander came out. So if you followed that storyline, Steph DeLander and PCO were kayfabe on story married, right? In a weird storyline, very weird storyline, if you ask me, right? And they ended up getting like divorced on story, and part of that divorce was revealed yesterday night that Steph DeLander got the Digital Media Championship in the proceedings of the divorce, right? Now, first off, this is the quickest divorce I've ever seen in my life, like proceeding wise, right? I mean, I know there are marriages that, last a month or two and they realize maybe we should do this, right? And they file for divorce. But the actual proceedings, bro, like this is the quickest one I've ever seen. It's been 3 months? You went from married to divorce finalized in 3 months. I've never seen that happen before, but I'm not really looking for this. Maybe I'm wrong, but she gets the Digital Media Championship, which is a weird thing to get in a divorce proceeding. If I can just sort of break down this story for a second, because you don't actually own the title. The company owns the title. So again, I'm breaking down stories. I'm overthinking this. It makes no sense. Anyway, this is all to debut. Mance Warner. I have zero clue. He's a GCW guy. I'm going to be honest with you. That's about as much time as I want to spend on this and thinking about it. And I really just don't care about what PCO does. I've been saying PCO needs to retire for at least 3 years now. Yeah, the fact that he's still wrestling is crazy. It is what it is. So that I answered the question. That I talked about PCO. I ain't got much more to talk about with the story. I don't necessarily care about it. But we're going to now we're moving on to this might be 90% of this episode. I'm gonna be honest with you. And we got a lot to talk about after this. So this is gonna be a longer episode, right? This is one of the things that I didn't plan when I planned this episode out. This segment was not planned, right? To talk about on this episode, right? I planned this episode probably Monday night, right? A lot of times what I do is Monday, the whole day of Monday, basically, I sit there and I'm thinking, okay, I got an episode on Tuesday. Tuesdays are super easy to plan out. We're going to talk about SmackDown from Friday. We're going to talk about Raw from Monday. We'll give an MVP of the week, and then we'll jump to like the questions in the Discord, right? That show is sort of just breaking down wrestling, right? So the main planning that I do is what am I going to talk about that deserves to be ranted on, and me giving personal opinions that isn't necessarily breaking down Raw and SmackDown, because that's what we do on Tuesdays, right? And so for this I wrote a show, and I'm like, I'm going to talk about TNA Genesis. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to talk about, I wrote the biggest thing for me to do on a Tuesday planning for Tuesday's episode is the Let's Get Cooking. And I wrote that, and I said, if you watch Tuesday's episode, the Let's Get Cooking was, what was if you had control to change one thing in AEW, what would it be? And as I was sitting there, I was like, I need to expand on this. I have 5. And so I'm not going to persuade this as like 5 things I would do if I took over. This is 5 things Tony Khan needs to do that he can do right now that I believe would fix AEW, right? And so we'll talk about TNA. We'll talk about the 5 things TK needs to do. Another news story broke out about Britt Baker. We'll talk about that next. And that was going to be the show. But then Tuesday's show happens, and Wavy D does this thing. And I don't hate it because it creates great content. Where we get into so I don't really plan a lot of Tuesday shows, because what tends to happen is we get a basic sort of rundown, and during the show, a lot of the conversation is unplanned, right? And that's why I like doing it with Wavy D, because he'll come up with some questions like while we're on air, and it's good programming, right? And so I don't even know what we were talking about and what led to this conversation, but we spent what felt like a good 20 minutes on, my Cody WrestleMania idea, right? And he asked very good questions, and I did my best to try to explain it. And then I posted the episode, didn't really think much of it, that it would create, I've talked about this Mania plan probably 4 times, and what I would do with Mania. And so the episode gets posted, and I immediately so that gets posted, the 21st at 11 o'clock, right? So the next morning, I'm driving to work, and I get an alert on my phone. And B-Master, listening to the podcast, asks a genuine question. He says, you guys keep saying Cody has no one to fight. Why not send Punk or Drew to SmackDown, right? Which is essentially what Wavy D was saying, without really saying it, without saying those exact words. That's what Wavy D's point was on Tuesday in the argument, right? And so I responded, and sitting here having this discussion, I feel like I need to describe this one more time and really go in depth. But I think there's an issue here, and the issue isn't necessarily the idea. The issue where the disconnect lies is the way that I do fantasy booking, and the fact that I think that I'm not explaining it correctly, but I don't think it's actually being understood what I'm saying, right? Because there is a difference, a vast difference between hearing, the words going in your ears and you hearing them, and then understanding. And I think what's happening is people are hearing what I'm saying, and they're not understanding them. And I think several things are getting in the way of that. One, probably not describing it the best. I'll take that part of the blame, right? But the second thing is I think a lot of wrestling fans, especially casuals, have in their mindset this presupposed way that WrestleMania is supposed to take, right? This was Wavy D's argument, right? Well, what WrestleMania has never had no title match except for the first one, right? Where the World Championship or the WWE title doesn't get defended. It's never happened outside of the first one. And But what was the point of the first one? Was to create a spectacle, right? Which is why the titles didn't really necessarily matter, which is the crux of my argument. But we'll get down to this. So what I really need you guys to do before I go into this, first off, last time I'm ever doing this, right? I'm not responding to this anymore on this show or in our Discord. Not responding to it, not talking about this no more. This is my prediction. Look, I'm wrong probably. I'll sit there and admit 90% chance I'm wrong with my WrestleMania predictions. But I need you to understand that I do fantasy booking. I don't just book Rumble, right? I can book, like for certain matches, I've booked all the way through like SummerSlam or to the end of the year with me, right? Because I draw out conclusions to their furthest extent, which was a complaint I had sometime like 2 years ago, that I feel like a lot of people have opinions and feelings on certain things in wrestling, but they never draw those conclusions, right? So I'm going to give an example. No beef, no disrespect when I say this. Notorious Nerdy D released this podcast yesterday. Go check it out. Really good episode. And he was talking about Saturday Night Main Event, which is tomorrow night, and asking, like, basically he was proposing or asking, giving his opinion that Jey Uso should beat Gunther, right? And he said something along the lines like, if Jey Uso loses to Gunther, I don't know how he fits into the WrestleMania plan, right? And so his idea was Jey Uso needs to win, one, because Gunther's boring, which I agree with, but two, because if he loses, he doesn't know how he fits in Rumble and into WrestleMania. Guys, the first thing the first thing that came to my mind when I heard this is, well, if you did my Team Cody versus Team Triple H match, all that gets solved. That makes sense. But my second question is, a lot of people make these statements like Jey Uso needs to win the world title on Saturday to beat Gunther, and they don't, either on purposely or intentionally, or either on purpose or without even thinking about it. Because a lot of people, they fantasy book one event at a time, and they don't think about the what's next. And so my question is, okay, Jey Uso beats Gunther, what's next? What's next for Jey Uso? That's how I book. That's how I fantasy book, right? So if I book John Cena to win the Royal Rumble, which I have, the next question is, okay, then what's next for John Cena? Well, John Cena gets Gunther at WrestleMania. That's what's next. Okay, well, what's next for John Cena after that? Well, I have him beating Gunther, right? Okay, well, what's next for John Cena after beating Gunther? Well, he ties the record for most Rumble wins. He gets 17. So now we're on this historic run in his final year in wrestling, right? And okay, well, he does the John Cena heel or face thing where he does the open challenges, right? And so he gives us promo. He says, I have 36 dates. I'm not going to be here every week. I got other things. Y'all know this. I'm old. Right. But when I'm here, there's an open challenge. And he defends the title, right? And then he gets to SummerSlam, and Adam Pearce says, you're having a fantastic year. It's your last year. It's your last SummerSlam. Who do you want to face? And Cena says, we're going to continue the open challenges. So we get to Minnesota, and we do the open challenge. And it's answered by Brock Lesnar. And this is the least likely thing. Again, I'm probably 90% wrong with this, right? But I was cooking when I came up with this idea, right? Brock Lesnar comes out, beats John Cena. 17th title run over, right? This gives John Cena, and I have a reason for why I do it this way, right? John Cena can carry the company through the spring, through the summer, where Gunther would be boring and would lose viewership. Why? Because it's summertime. People are out on vacation. People are out of school. They're on vacation. It's summertime. They're at the beach. They're right. It's spring break to start the run, right? And so you carry it through spring break, through summer, through all of that, with John Cena being the promotional piece. You carry it through Saudi. You carry it into the promotion for SummerSlam, right? That sells tickets, gets people in seats, right? Brock Lesnar enter an open challenge, beat John Cena, which is right. Cena then transitions the next week. He says, you know what? I only have 4 months left. There's one thing I haven't done in my career, right? And that's win the IC title. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to earn my place to do that. And let's say at Saudi Arabia, Crown Jewel, John Cena versus whoever the IC title is at the time, I'm taking it off of Braun Breaker because Brock Lesnar and Braun Breaker is the next match where Braun beats Brock Lesnar to get over, right? But that's a side story. We don't have to do all of that, right? We're talking about Cena's story in this, right? So whoever the IC champion is at the time, Cena comes after him. It could be face versus face because the whole story is Cena wants to be number one, right? And so we have at Crown Jewel, John Cena winning the IC championship, right? And then John Cena is saying, you know what, we're gonna do the open challenge. And here's what's gonna happen. At Survivor Series, at War Games, I'm gonna issue an open challenge for my final PLE of the year. Of my career, right? And I'm doing War Games in Boston, and I'm having it answered by Carmelo Hayes. And Carmelo Hayes comes in, answers it, gets put over by Cena. Cena leaves wrestling on his back, putting over Carmelo Hayes, right? That's I did all of that fantasy booking solely to predict Royal Rumble. And so I need, before I go into talk about Cody, right? Because y'all talk about Punk, right? And so I'm gonna go ahead and go into my argument here, right? So my main argument is Cody has no legitimate contender. Sure, you can send CM Punk to SmackDown, but what sense does that make? What's the story, right? And because, again, I don't think CM Punk wins Royal Rumble. So having him go over to SmackDown makes zero sense. Having him win the Rumble and choosing Cody, what's the story, right? Because this whole thing of, well, you win the Rumble, that Wavy D, I get your point. Yes, that's how Royal Rumbles were booked for years under Vince McMahon. You won the Rumble, you picked who you fought. But the problem with that method is it's not really good storytelling. It's one of the reasons I got tired of the Royal Rumble as a gimmick, because there was no story. And I feel like WrestleMania has two main purposes. You end current storylines and you begin new ones. And if you don't have a story going into your biggest show, right, it's sort of like, I always view it this way, right? WrestleMania is the finale of the wrestling year, right? Which is part of the reason why, like, if I was in control of WWE, I would move WrestleMania to December. And I know what you're thinking. It's an outdoor event. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's no longer going to be an outdoor event. Here's why. These big event centers are building domes for a reason. Vegas is a dome. Where were they last year? They were in Philly. That was an outdoor event. That's very, very odd. And notice what the response was to an outdoor Mania. Bro, it was cold as shit. People were complaining about the cold, even in April last year, right? Next year is rumored to be in New Orleans. That's a dome. The year after that, it's rumored to be in Indy. That's a dome. The year after that, Nashville's building a new stadium. That's going to be a dome, right? And they're rumored to get it once that stadium's built. Vegas is a dome this year. When they were in LA for 39, that was a dome. They're running domes, right? Royal Rumbles get run in baseball stadiums that are open air, right? I think WrestleMania should have finalized the year. It should be the first week not the first week. It should be like the week before Christmas, right? Should be WrestleMania. and then you get 2 weeks off from wrestling. That could be like the Raws and SmackDowns could quite literally be the best of the year awards, right? And then you get into day one on the brand new on the new year and start a new saga, right? But WrestleMania is the season finale of the year each year, right? And so it should stop, end current storylines and start new ones. That's how I view WrestleMania. And so before we really go into me explaining this, I did all of this sort of context because I think the number one thing is y'all aren't understanding me. You're not paying attention to what I'm actually saying because you're trying to defend the way your brain thinks that well WrestleMania is supposed to be a certain, and what I'm saying is it doesn't have to always be the same way. Right? So when I sit here, my number one point, it's the same. Look at current WWE right now. Let's stop fantasy booking for a minute. You know, the thing that annoys me is when people fantasy book and they fantasy book and they don't take into account current storylines, right? They completely just make up things out of nowhere, right? And so I'm gonna ask this question, Wavy D. I know you're gonna listen to this all the way through. When you talk about Punk winning Rumble, does this come from that dude on YouTube who makes the videos how Royal Rumble should be? Because everything you described, you either A, you watch that video, or B, you're on the same wavelength of him because that's quite literally his story is that Paul Heyman pays the limit that Paul Heyman pays his story back by eliminating Roman Reigns, essentially, right? And it's not stupid. It's just not. I don't think it makes much sense for what they actually are, I believe, planning for Royal Rumble. But we'll talk about on Tuesday. So what about Punk? Well, it makes no sense because Punk's has partnered with Cody in the past, has zero legitimate beef with Cody at the moment in a storyline. Okay, so then you ask about Drew, and I said, okay, that makes sense. Drew can go over to SmackDown and be a legitimate contender to Cody, but I think there's a smarter way to do it that can be, again, notice that I said Mania should create new stories. Imagine we do this 8-man match, right? And you have Cody, Sammy, Jay, and CM Punk versus Owens, Randy, Drew, and Seth Rollins, right? Imagine the storylines you could finish because all of those have been connected in some sort of way, shape, or form for like the last, I don't know, 6 months, right? So you end all of those stories and you put a nail in them at WrestleMania. But what if in doing so, you create some new stories? Maybe you get something where Sammy and Randy get into it and they start a story. And Punk starts a story with or maybe Punk and Randy, right? And Seth and Sammy and Jay and Kevin Owens, or Sammy and Kevin Owens do a saga and Jay gets, you understand what I'm, but I like the perspective of a Drew versus Cody match. But imagine if you actually build a story around it and you do this 8-man match and you have Drew pin the world champion at WrestleMania to main event night 1, and Drew comes in saying, I need to be number 1 contender. And throughout the spring into the summer, you can build a feud between Cody and Drew that actually makes sense, that makes you want to tune into the next big event, which is SummerSlam. And so you could long-term book this to where the payoff is Drew winning the title at SummerSlam. Right? And that's what I'm talking about when I make predictions, I book long-term. I don't just think about the immediate result. I think about, okay, Drew wins this match. He gets a title match. Now we can build a feud that actually makes sense, because Cody's problem is when he's outside of the bloodline, he does like 1 month feuds. When he's outside of the bloodline storyline, he does like 1 month feuds, right? So if you gave him an extended feud that's like 4 months long, and it runs through SummerSlam between him and Drew McIntyre, you can cook. You can cook with that, right? And that's what I'm thinking about here. And then you can create a story between Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn that can end again at SummerSlam. You can create a story between like a CM Punk and a Seth Rollins. Maybe you could finish that at SummerSlam. You can create something, right? Because here's my major point on this that I've tried to explain. WWE WrestleMania is only going to have they have a set amount of time. I believe at most 14 matches, but I'm going to say for the sake of argument, that they run 12 matches. There's not enough room to put every single and big name draw in a match by themselves, because you have to display the mid card. You can't just complete, right? And Wavy D will come back and say, well, WrestleMania is a whole week. And you're not wrong. But tell me this real quick. If they moved Piper Niven versus Chelsea Green, let's say that's the match. If they move that match to Friday before Mania, does it not feel like it's a second hand, that it's not prestigious and that it doesn't matter? Imagine Chelsea Green getting that WrestleMania moment on Mania, defending her title, right? Imagine Becky versus Lyra Valkyria for the Women's IC Championship, and Lyra beating Becky, one of the greatest women's wrestlers to ever do it, a future Hall of Famer, and it gives prestige to the belt, gives prestige to Lyra, it gets her over with the fan base, it legitimizes Lyra Valkyria, and you can't kick that off of Mania, right? I can understand maybe kicking the women's tag off of Mania, understood. Kicking the Raw tag team off, understood. I think you need the SmackDown, whatever their title is called, for the tag team, because that's the more involved tag division, but it's also the one where you can get the flippy shit that can start a night one that is like the center point that brings in the fast paced, it builds the crowd up, right? You're going to have some grudge matches. If it goes the way I've predicted, we're going to get like a Jacob Fatu and a Solo Sikoa match. That can't not be on Mania. You're going to have a match between Roman and Rock that's going to main event night 2. You're not kicking that off of Mania, right? I have Cena winning the Rumble for this same reason, that this saves a spot, and that Cena can then go and fight Gunther, and I don't need to create another feud for Cena that takes another spot from someone else, right? I think Charlotte wins the Women's Rumble. She's obviously getting Tiffany Stratton, right? I'm still going to stand by my hunch that Bianca Belair wins the Women's Elimination Chamber, and there's a whole story here between what you can do with her and Rhea Ripley. This isn't just me glazing for Bianca, as easy as that would be, because Bianca is fine, right? And I believe Bianca's the greatest women's pro wrestler on the planet right now, right? But again, the what's next for Bianca? Well, two things can happen in this Mania match, right? Jade Cargill gets involved. I don't think Jade comes back till Mania. I don't think she's going to be in the Rumble. I don't. Because what I think is going to happen, and again, I could be wrong, is that Bianca gets this Mania match. How I would book it is Bianca wins the title. The next night in her celebration on Raw after Mania, Jade comes out, pretends like acts like she's going to celebrate with Bianca, but actually hits Jaded Edge on Bianca, walks out and leaves, comes out the next week after that and says, the internet said I turned on Bianca, but no, that's not the truth. Bianca turns on me. And then, hey, truck, air the tape. and it shows Bianca pushing Jade off the ledge into the car, right? And that she's the one that attacked Jade. And then Bianca comes out. You know, if you've seen her new merch, it looks like Tupac inspired, like gangsta type shit. And it screams heel turn to me, right? And so Bianca could win this title. And then again, you're setting up the next big event with the SummerSlam with a Jade versus Bianca for the title type shit, which Bianca could win. And then you could set up another match for War Games where Jade could get her comeuppance and win the title, right? And you pay off that, however long they've been a tag team, you pay all of this story off ultimately by having Jade win the title at the end of the year, right? That's how I book, right? That's how I fantasy book, right? Each one of these 6 matches that I have on my way too early, all of these 12 matches have some sort of story already in my mind that I can use to explain why they happen outside of the men's US title, because I don't even think they know what the fuck they're booking with that division, right? But everything on here I can explain, right? You're gonna have your grudge matches. I still think with this Kofi Xavier New Day thing that Kofi Kingston's gonna turn on Xavier at the Royal Rumble. I actually think that's going to happen, and I think it's going to create Woods versus Kingston. That match can't happen on a Raw after Mania, right? And so because there's not enough space, like even if you add 2 more matches here, right? I thoroughly believe that Mania doesn't need solely every single title to be defended. And I don't think it would be an issue if Cody Rhodes didn't defend his world champion, right? Because Gunther's going to defend. You have both women's titles. That'll be banger matches, right? I think at the end you have this match, and I think that's the plot. I think that's the thing that's really getting the people is that it's breaking tradition, and people don't like that. But I don't think Endeavor cares about tradition. They care about money. They care about what brings people to the arena. And let me tell you something. You book a match with that amount of star power, right? And you could create some sort of story. It could quite literally be as simple as next weekend at the Rumble, whatever the stipulation they're signing. What if that stipulation is it's unsanctioned? WWE's not responsible for it. Y'all can do whatever you want, but we're not responsible. It's no DQ, unsanctioned, right? Well, what does that allow? It allows for Randy Orton to come back, act like he's coming to attack Kevin Owens, but actually attack Cody Rhodes. And in the response, Jey Uso comes out to defend his buddy, right? And in the response, maybe Drew McIntyre comes out and attacks Jey Uso. And then you get the rest of the group. Sami Zayn comes out. CM Punk comes out. Seth Rollins comes out, right? All these people come out, and we have all 8 standing and beating each other up at some point in the match, right? At some point in the match, you have the other 6 that aren't in the match, right? Because it is a ladder match. It can't just end in like a pin, right? So you have the other 6 somehow come out. Cody get out of the ring, go fighting in the crowd. Cody hits 3 crossroads, climbs the ladder, and retains, but he's pissed off that his match got interfered with. And so he comes backstage the next night and says, bruh, we got to end this once and for all. I don't care how we do it. We got to end this feud once and for all. Mania 4-on-4. Team Cody versus Team Authority, or Team, the establishment in Team Cody versus the anti-establishment, right? And we'll end this once and for all at Mania. Like that to me is a better story than just having Cody in some random match at Mania because some dude won the Rumble, right? And I'm of the mindset, and I'll explain this again on Monday. I'm of the mindset John Cena is the only one winning this match. If you're putting odds on anyone, put it on John Cena. It's the only way this makes sense, because I think there's going to be This might be the most story-driven Royal Rumble match you've ever seen in your life. Roman's not winning. The Rock's not winning. Punk's not winning. I think there's going to be some sort of story built there. Kevin Owens isn't going to win this. He's got a match that night, right? The only one that makes sense is John Cena. It's the only one that makes sense, in my opinion. So the question really at the end of this, now that I've spent some time going over it, I hope I've cleared it up. I know, Wavy D's sort of question is, the part I don't understand is how you say we don't have enough time to book a compelling story. We don't. He says, again, WWE starts the road to Mania every year at Rumble. And like I've said earlier, that was under Vince. And the story was you win Rumble, right? Outside of like 05, like in the last 20 years, outside of 05 when Batista turned on Triple H, can you name one where the story going in was super compelling enough to justify, right? And there may be some that I missed in the years between 05 and 2014 when I started, Daniel Bryan's was compelling, sure, but Daniel Bryan's story was already in progress. Daniel Bryan's story was just a progression of, right? And Daniel Bryan didn't even win Royal Rumble, right? But Daniel Bryan's story at WrestleMania 30, right? He didn't win the Rumble. His story to get into it was, the David and Goliath type story, right? And it was compelling, but he didn't win a Rumble for it. But it was already a story that was already, it was greased up. It was ready to go. It was already in motion. And that's what I'm saying. Starting a brand new story from scratch. There's a way to tell the story to make it really good and make it feel like it's worth WrestleMania. And if you start this thing on February 1st, you're giving yourself quite literally a month and a half to tell motivations and to give reasons. And Triple H, let's just be honest, Triple H isn't the best at this. He's not. Right? What Triple H is really good at is, these sort of like death feuds, the Punks versus the Punk versus Drew, right? Where it's the real heat, and he can just sort of turn that up to 11, and that the right. I don't think to start a brand new story and have it build the rising action that it needs to get to the climax that is the match at WrestleMania. I don't think you have enough time in 90 days in less than 90 days. In less than 90 days after Royal Rumble, right? In less than 90 days after Royal Rumble, you're going to have WrestleMania, right? Like guys, I don't think you understand that it's quite literally going to be, that's 28. Doing the math right here. It will quite literally be like 75 days from Royal Rumble till WrestleMania is like 78 days. That's not enough time to tell a compelling new era type story, right? Where we saw the story last year that of Rock, Reigns, and Cody and Seth and all of them. That was a moment, right? It was a moment. And that's my whole point, is WrestleMania is going to be about moments now, right? And you had a storyline that started, right? That last year's WrestleMania main event was a story that started the year prior, and the individual story arc started the first Raw of 2024, right? When Rock came out and said, San Diego, when I go out to eat tonight, should I sit at a booth? Should I sit at the bar? Or should I sit at the head of the table? Right? That started that storyline we got at the main event of WrestleMania. And then you had Cody win a Rumble, but that was just another plot point in the already beginning storyline, right? So you already had a story that was greased up, no rust on it. The gears were running, right? To start on February 1st, a brand new story that needs to get the rising action and the motivation and what's the point of this, right? And if the motivation is just I won Rumble, I'm sorry, that doesn't cut it for me. That's a bad story. And I'm tired of people utilizing something like a Royal Rumble to convince me that bad stories need to happen. I want moments at WrestleMania. And the moments we can get in this 4-on-4 tag match where we end the current storylines and we can begin Drew versus Cody here so that when we get to, the rumors Armageddon, right? And Drew, and I know it was a fan-made poster, but Drew was on the poster, right? Can you imagine getting to, can you imagine, like, first off, you can build the fuck out of this feud with they're running Europe in March, right? They're going to run European shows in March. And this feud itself would sell tickets like hotcakes as they're leaning toward WrestleMania, right? Can you just imagine this is star power, right? But it also then allows the rest of the card to allow for the mid card to be on the show and to get that moment because that's where they're lacking right now in WWE. They're lacking right now in the mid card. And I don't know. I hope this explains it enough. If it doesn't, I don't think I can ever say anything that will convince anyone otherwise. I don't think there's enough time to tell a story. There is no legitimate challenger to Cody right now. Right? Wavy D, you asked James on his podcast last night why it seems like there's only ever two people in a title picture at the same time. You recognize the fact that you literally just recognized the fact that I just said. Cody has no legitimate challenger. He beats Kevin Owens. Who's next? There is no legitimate challenger. Right? And Drew may be it, but to start a brand new story with, right? And the story can't just be, well, I'm attacking Cody because he teamed with Roman Reigns. Guys, that's a shitty fucking story. I'm sorry to break it to you. That's ass, dude. That's a really, like, that's why I never liked Drew versus Jey Uso, because that was the plot point. Jey versus Sami Zayn. That was the single plot point was, oh, you tagged with Roman Reigns at some time in the past, and I don't like Roman Reigns. Bro, it's been 2.5 years since Solo Sikoa cost you the belt at Clash at the Castle. It's time to move on, big dog. Right? That story doesn't work anymore. Right? You got to move on. You got to get over Roman, right? I'm sorry. Like that story is just ass to me. Right? But let's move on to what was originally planned, right? Again, I don't say anything that I just said to offend anyone or to say y'all are dumb or stupid. I don't think you quite understand the way that I'm thinking about it. And so I tried to explain it to you the best that I could. That's the last time I'm ever talking about that, though. Because I'm convinced that needs to be the Mania match. And so I'm speaking that into power, right? Triple H, make that the match. Like, let me send you what's going on in my brain. Bring me up to Stamford, Connecticut, or wherever your home office is that I can talk to you, Triple H, because I got some ideas for how you can turn Mania. And here's why I booked the way that I booked. It's partially stupid, right? But a lot of people, and then we'll talk about what I originally planned to talk about, right? I'm going the side tangent real quick. A lot of people always say, man, if Triple H called me to give me an idea, man, I'm going to give him a banger story. And then what they will present him with would require him to destroy the entire foundation of the current storyline, right? They'll do something along the lines of like, Cody's a champion. He needs to face off against, and they'll name their favorite wrestler and will destroy the foundation of the current program that we got going on, right? Or, right, it would be something along the lines of like, man, I really like Dakota Kai, right? Imagine if I went to Triple H and said, I really like Dakota Kai. I think she's a very good in-ring wrestler. You know what? Put her against Rhea Ripley and have her win the title off of Rhea Ripley, right? That's the type of fantasy booking a lot of people do. And it's the annoying kind of fantasy booking. The type of fantasy booking I do takes into consideration what Triple H has already done. So if for the random chance that Triple H gives me a phone call and says, "Hey, it's Paul Levesque from WWE. We just want to know, hey, can you make a trip up here to Stamford? We want your insight on the booking of the show, and maybe have you book a story or two," right? And so I can go up there and say, "Hey, man, here's how I would book WrestleMania using what you've already established. Here's how I would continue that. And here's how I would get this story to this point," right? So, that's the way I book, the way I do. I think it's common sense booking. I think it's logical booking. And it's drawing out conclusions and decisions that you make in the booking, drawing them out to the furthest extent that you could possibly make. Jey Uso wins the title tomorrow. What next? First off, there's no way in hell. Hell will literally have to freeze over for Jey Uso to win the title. There's no way in hell he wins the title on a glorified house show. I don't believe it. Like, if it happens, it happens, and I'm wrong. But there's no way I can envision Jey Uso winning that title. There's no way that match ends clean, by the way. There's no way that match ends clean. Someone's getting involved in that match. There's no way that match ends clean. All right, let's talk about what was originally planned. Britt Baker. Britt Baker apparently is in the doghouse of AEW, of Tony Khan. So the news report, is essentially that Tony Khan in the AEW locker room views Britt Baker as hard to work with, and they've basically scrapped her from all plans. She's asked for a release and it's been denied. And that, the AEW fans are coming out and saying, Britt screwed Britt, man. She's hard to work with. They're reciting Tony Khan's predisposed narrative that he spreads through Alvarez and Meltzer. And I just have to ask a question. Does this not sound familiar? Because there was a guy almost 2 years ago who got fired from AEW for being too hard to work with. And the fans said that he did it to himself. Look, guys, at this point, this story sounds familiar. And it sounds like the way you treated CM Punk on the way out the door. And if y'all release Britt Baker, y'all are dumb. First off, not using Britt Baker is insane to me. Even if she is hard to work, let's say the story is true. Even if she is hard to work with, she is one of the main reasons. Ask anyone in the casual wrestling community Discord. Ask Milwaukee Mike, ask DJ Wavy D, ask me, ask Nerdy D, ask Dead Chef. Right? If you come in and you go to the casual wrestling page and you join his Discord and you ask any single person in that group to name one person on the women's roster that would make them, that if they focused the storyline telling in the women's roster around one person in the women's division that would make them watch who it would be, I guarantee you, with 100% guarantee, that it would be Britt Baker. No one's choosing Mercedes Moné. No one's choosing Toni Storm. No one's choosing Mariah May. No one's choosing Chris Statlander. No one's choosing Megan Bain or whoever just debuted. No one's choosing Camille. No one's choosing Deonna Purrazzo. No one's choosing Harley Cameron or Anna Jay or Sky Blue or Julia Hart. No. The casual fans want Britt Baker on TV. It's not Jamie Hayter. It's Britt Baker. Ask any casual fan who they want from the AEW roster on TV. It's Britt fucking Baker. And AEW has this thing where do they not want to make money at this point? because it makes zero sense to me, right? Makes zero sense to me how they're like the only major promotion that doesn't understand what helping a company and making money. Like, why is it only the people in AEW that don't understand how to make money? Guys, you had CM Punk, and yes, they had beef. You know what could have happened? You could have put CM Punk and FTR in a tag team, right? And you could have had them against Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. You could have even added, like, I don't even know who was on the roster at that point. You could have added to Punk and FTR. That would have made, you could have had like a Ricky Starks, right? And then added Adam Hangman Page to the group, right? And you could have made money. But like Punk versus Kenny Omega at the first Wembley show would have sold tickets. It would have made money, would have been a banger of a match, and would have made money. But instead, you decide to keep them apart, and then what ends up happening is that you lose money on the deal because CM Punk, which Rollins has personal animus against, who McIntyre isn't the biggest fan of. You know what both of them did? They understood how to be a professional, and they made money, and they sold tickets, and they main evented shows, and they made the product the best it was. And Drew McIntyre, who isn't the biggest fan of CM Punk, just had the feud of the year of 2024 together with CM Punk, and they acted like professionals. And he just had it happen in TNA where Tessa Blanchard comes back and Jordynne Grace, knowing she's on her way out, knowing she could have asked TNA for a match against, someone like Xia Brookside or Tasha Steelz at Genesis, and for her to go out with her shoulders raised. No. Instead, she acts like a professional. She understands where she's at in her career. She knows she's leaving. She's going to WWE. She wants to help put TNA over and build the next big heel in the company, and she loses to the person she doesn't like in Tessa Blanchard, and she puts over the company, and she puts over Tessa, and she makes them money because that's what professionals do. But AEW wrestlers, for some odd reason, have too much ego to make money. You're doing this to Britt Baker now, too? I'm sorry if I choose Britt Baker's side over the side that constantly chooses the All Friends Elite group over the best superstars on the brand. She is a moneymaker. Here's what you need to do, Tony. Release her. Release Phoenix. Release Ricky Starks. Release Wardlow. Release Powerhouse. Have them come over to WWE, and I guarantee you we'll make money with them. We'll make money with them. Have Britt Baker step one foot at the Royal Rumble. Let's have it. If she steps in at a SummerSlam and shows up, we'll make money with her the rest of the year. Like, let right? I promise you. Because we just saw it with Penta, who is much less marketable, much less known to a casual audience. And we saw that WWE took time and marketed him and pushed him and gave him the best debut you could possibly have. Now imagine having someone that speaks full English, who is very good on the promos, has decent wrestling skills, is marketable, has a gimmick that she could utilize, the heel dentist gimmick that you could utilize. Britt Baker makes money for this company on day one. And you have a casual audience who is enthralled by her, finds her uber attractive, has the look, right? And no one can tell me otherwise. That this isn't partially because her and Adam Cole broke up, and Adam Cole is friends with the Young Bucks. No one can convince me otherwise that they don't have this type of time, that this isn't the situation going on here. No one can convince me otherwise. Right? Unless Britt Baker says, no, man, this has nothing to do with Cole. I'm going to sit here and think it's because of Adam Cole. At least part of it. I think a lot of it is also Tony Khan just doesn't want to make money. But like, Tony, what did you think would happen, right? Because here's what happened. You started and you built a pillar of your women's division under Britt Baker. And then what ended up happening is Tony's like, well, I need a new toy. I'm going to go sign Deonna Purrazzo. Not really utilize her, not really use her. I need another toy. I'm going to go sign Saraya. Not really utilize her, not really use her. I need a new toy. I'm going to go sign Mercedes Moné. And I'm going to go let her run the indies and collect belts over there and keep my TBS title hostage. And I'm not really going to utilize her in the main event picture. I'm going to go hire Toni Storm. And she's going to be my biggest wrestler star. And in the process, Britt, you're the pillar. You're holding us up, but we don't really need you. Sorry. What did you think was going to happen? Tony cares about spending money to get new toys for the sandbox. But he doesn't want to make money. You can make money with Britt Baker. I just find that y'all using the same story you did with Punk. So sorry if I don't believe you. Because I don't believe you with Punk either. Because they showed the tape and bro, Punk didn't even do anything wrong, dude. He didn't even do anything wrong. You can't hear the audio, so you don't know if Perry said anything to him. But you pair, was it Van Fleet that Punk was on where he gave the rundown, and you run that audio with the video, and it completely exonerates Punk. He did nothing wrong. Right? But let's talk about TNA Genesis real quick. We'll get back to AEW to end the show. All right? But let's talk about TNA Genesis for a second. Overall, fantastic use of $40 that I spent. Right? A lot of these times I buy a pay-per-view and it's like $40 for TNA or like AEW or something. And especially with AEWs, I turn it off and I'm like, bro, they just stole $50 from me. This one, I justifiably believe I don't know if 40 is the right amount of money, but I would have paid for it. Like, I'm fine with it, right? I would give it like an 8 out of 10 overall, right? Not everything was for me. Like the hardcore matches, not for me, right? The Rosemary and Masha match, I like both of the competitors. I'm not a big fan of hardcore matches, and I'm even less of a fan of women doing hardcore matches just because one slip-up ends careers, and I'm all for career longevity and having life after the industry, right? I think that's something that in the early part of the business up until, quite literally the last 20 years, no one's really cared about the long-term effects of the wrestlers. And even today, like when you look at the type of stuff that happens on the indie scene, you really have to question if these promoters actually care about them or if they just or if they just allow whatever would pop the crowd. And so, I'm not a big fan of the hardcore matches, right? But I thought they were tastefully done. Some parts were like, that's too much for me. But the tag match between the Rascals and the Hardys were good. You had Fraxium show up, which made me pop. Cora Jade showing up after the Masha match was interesting. To start the show the way you did, where you started with Moose versus Ace Austin, and then that match ends, right? And then immediately Macklin and so that match ends, right? And so the system's already in the ring, right? All of them. As you have I call him Kurt Hawkins, but Brian Myers and what the fuck's his name? Eddie Edwards. It's already in the ring, and so their opponents just come bull rushing down Macklin and Eric Young, and we start the second match. That was good. We didn't have to do a system entrance again. And so I thought that was very well positioned, and the match order was perfect with that. The main event was really good with Joe Hendry, becoming world champion. But I've already mentioned this, but match of the night, and quite honestly, the first entrant on match of the year, I don't know if it'll stay here that long, but Tessa Blanchard versus Jordynne Grace was a masterpiece of a match. It's a masterpiece of a match, right? And so the two things that I really hang on is that match and then the Joe Hendry segment, right? Those are the two things that I really cared about. Those are the two reasons I spent $40 to watch the pay-per-view. And it was well worth the money spent. But I have a question, and this is no one else in the audience except for my brother, my podcast network homie here at the Junkyard Media Group, the Junkyard James. This question is for you. You said on your show, not yesterday, but the week before, with this partnership, that this was just a way for WWE to exploit the TNA roster, and in return, they're going to send a bunch of nobodies. Guys, boy, my guy. I don't know if you know this, but Cora Jade got sent there. And she might be the most over NXT woman outside of Roxanne Perez. Right? Oh, she's just a mid-card. Okay, position on the card doesn't mean, right? Like Chad Gable is a big star, right? But he's a mid-carder. Solo Sikoa is a big star. He's not necessarily mid-carder, but at one time he was. They sent over some big name. Like I would consider Bianca Belair a big name, but she's running the mid-card right now. Like position on the card doesn't determine whether you're a star or not. And Cora Jade is a superstar in the NXT world. She gets sent over there. That's a big name, dude. And then they send over the tag team champions, not just for a segment, not to invite the Rascals to come fight on NXT. No. We're going to fight live. The first time in 8 years that TNA was live. We're going to defend the NXT championship, the tag team champions on TNA programming. In its first live show in 8 years, we're going to defend the NXT belts on TNA television for the first time ever this has ever been done. And they put on probably the greatest tag team match I've ever seen. It was that good. That is how a partnership's supposed to work. So I thought they weren't right. None of that. But Fraxium is the biggest tag team in wrestling right now. I promise you, the best tag team in wrestling right now. Better than anything going on in AEW, anything on the main roster, anything in Japan or Britain, or name any promotion. The greatest tag team champions and the greatest tag team currently going on in the world, active at this year, 2025, is Fraxium. And you're going to see a lot more of them, I believe, this year in different places, whether it's TNA, Raw, and SmackDown. I believe that their whole gimmick is we're the greatest tag team alive, and I think they're going to utilize that very well. Right, but I want to talk about TNA. TNA, for 3 reasons, has bumped themselves up to the second place spot in the industry of wrestling, right? On the hierarchy. Here's why. WWE's number 1. And if any real fan of the industry who understands hierarchies, understand WWE's top dog. Right, James? Your co-host, Cody, he recognizes that. He said it multiple times last night that WWE is top dog. James, I know you disagree that. I know you think that AEW is the greatest thing in wrestling, but you'd be the only person. Well, maybe not the only person. But there's a very small, and I mean small, like less than 1% group of wrestling fans that believe that AEW is better in a hierarchy of like if I were to be like the top dog in the industry. No one's saying AEW, right? So the real battle comes in with, is it AEW or TNA that's second place? And for the longest time, I would have had to say AEW. But guys, for 3 reasons, I now will put TNA in the second place spot in the industry. Here's reason number 1. They understand their role within the industry. They're not there to compete with WWE. They're there to develop wrestlers to go to WWE. I don't understand why that's a bad thing to say either. It's not a bad place to be, right? That'd be like if the Charlotte Knights were pissed off that they have to compete with the Chicago White Sox. No. You're developmental for the Chicago White Sox. Everyone's goal is the White Sox. Not everyone makes it to the White Sox. They may stop at the Charlotte Knights, but that's you're the AAA team of the White Sox, right? So I believe if AEW understood their role, that they are what and how WWE, and here's the thing, the victors get to write history. They get to write the rules, right? So WWE's the top dog. They get to write the rules. AEW doesn't get to write the rules. WWE gets to write the rules because they're the top dog. That's how the law of the jungle works. So the rules are this. We're WWE. We get all the top stars. We look at AEW as that's developmental for our next big superstar. We're gonna do to AEW with Ricky Starks what we did with Penta. And we're going to let them train them. We're going to give them the exposure. Orange Cassidy, he had some big exposure in AEW. Contract's over. You know what? Sign Orange Cassidy. We can use that name. Right? That's the law of the jungle. Right? That's how business works. The guys who get to write the rules get to write the rules. The top dogs get to write the rules. Right? So TNA understands their role, and they formed a partnership. Understanding their role in this partnership is to give name recognition, guys that have name recognition, Jordynne Grace, Joe Hendry, Nick Nemeth, maybe even AJ Francis, right? We have name recognition. We want to use them. We want to promote you guys by using them on our brands. And in the process, we're going to send you NIL athletes and WWE ID superstars and people who are in the PC that may not be ready for TV on an NXT level, but we're going to send them to TNA and give them some exposure. Some of the new guys, we're going to send them to you. TNA knows their role. Reason number 2, 90% of their show, and I'm not going to say everything is good, but they have very good characters. They have very good storylines. I don't know if you know this, but I'm a character and storyline guy, right? Where AEW fails, I think TNA progresses, is the characters and storylines. Every single segment has a character and a storyline in it. And because of that, reason number 3, they appeal to the casual audience. And that might be the most important reason. I told James and Cody back in 2019, I've said it numerous times on various different podcasts that I've tried to run. For those who don't know, these don't exist. You can't go back and listen to them. They were very cringe at the time I was recording them. But I had a podcast known as the Unhinged Wrestling Podcast. Not very good. Not a lot of listeners. Didn't really have a support system to build behind. Me and Cody and James used to do a show together called the Outlaw Wrestling Podcast. And that didn't really work either. If anyone remembers us from WrestleMania 33, we went out and got like marketing stuff, like a flag to like wave while we were tailgating and shit. But that didn't really work much. I know the old ladies at the pool at the villa we stayed at, got a live show as we recorded outside an episode. Thanks for cooperating by being quiet. But I've been saying this for years. The first company to appeal to the casual audience will win. And that was talking about AEW and WWE. Because at the time, WWE wasn't appealing to that casual audience. But they started to appeal to them again. And now they're doing the best they've ever done. And TNA's appealing to the casuals. And they're doing the best they've done in a while. Bro, did you see the crowd that was at that live taping last night? Pretty big crowd. Now, San Antonio's a big market. But pretty big crowd. Full arenas at the PLE. Pay-per-view, sorry. At the pay-per-view, full arena. At this live taping, full arena. They appeal to the audience that can watch them. That's the casuals, right? They appeal to them. AEW, learn from TNA. So let's get to that. I believe there's 5 things that Tony Khan can do that will immediately fix AEW. So let's break it down. Thing number 1, the first thing Tony Khan needs to do, take a step back and hire a director of wrestling operations. Whether it's Eric Bischoff, someone with understanding of the business. That's not Daniel Bryan. Like, don't make it a Daniel Bryan. Why? Because Daniel Bryan's a mark. Have someone who hire someone who understands the business, but isn't a mark, isn't in the wrestling bubble, isn't one of, like, Eric Bischoff would work. Why? Because he's not a wrestler. He doesn't have friends in the inner circles of the wrestling locker rooms. And have him be like a director of wrestling operations, and Tony Khan just be the CEO. In fact, Tony Khan, do that for every company you own. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, hire a director of football operations. I'm sure you have one. Take a step back, big dog. You obviously ain't doing anything right, because the Jaguars are bathwater. Just like AEW is bathwater. Just like your soccer team is bathwater, to the point that I don't even remember the name. I think it's Fulham, but I could be wrong. And I know the fans hate you in London. So the first thing Tony Khan needs to do, take a step back, stop being the booker, hire a director of wrestling operations who can hire a booking team and put together personnel backstage that can maintain the locker room, maintain order, actually run the company the way it needs to be run, and have them, right? And I think that in and of itself, I believe, fixes a lot of the issues. The second, more storylines and gimmicks. I've given praise in the past to something like a Swerve versus Hangman. Though it wasn't for me, it was at least a storyline. I don't think there was a lot of gimmick in it, but it was at least a storyline. Mariah May and Tony Storm's gimmick and storyline last year was one of the best ever told in wrestling. Excuse me. More of that, but not just one main storyline. No, every single segment. If you watch NXT, and basically what I'm saying is mimic NXT. That's how they book their show. If you watch NXT, every single segment on every single show has a gimmick or a storyline that is the purpose of the segment. Whether it's Obafemi, whether it's Tony D'Angelo, whether it's Alexis King, or whoever's on TV, there's a gimmick being, with having character development, or there's a storyline being progressed or started or in some way, shape, or form. Every single person that's on TV is on TV for a purpose. That is what needs to happen with AEW, right? This is more than just the easy, run smaller venues. You're already doing that, right? And I think it's working. Now you got to talk about, like, the actual operations of the business and booking. Because what's my thing? What is my slogan? 90% of wrestling is booking. 90% of this industry is booking. The other 10% is the execution of the booking. But if the storylines being written are ass, it doesn't matter how perfect the execution is. Because the execution doesn't truly matter if the storyline's not there. Number 3, Dynamite and Collision are your 2 shows, right? And that's pretty solid, right? So each show should have a set roster and a set amount of championships. That way, let's say Chris Statlander's on Collision, and I really like Chris Statlander, and that's all I want to watch. Well, I know where I can watch her at. And I don't have to watch Dynamite. I can just watch Collision. right? Each brand should have a set roster and a set championship. And while I say that, keep ROH off of AEW programming. That's second. That's sort of a 3A, 3B, right? Each show should have a set roster and championships, and don't cross them. And that's between Dynamite, Collision, and ROH. Don't cross them, right? Have them have their own set rosters, have their own set shows, and their set championships, right? Number 4, less shock and awe, less blood, because the more blood you do, the less people care about it. Have you ever noticed that when Jon Moxley bleeds to start the show and then Swerve is bleeding at the end of the show, it doesn't mean as much. So less shock and awe. We don't need it all the time because it takes away the importance when it actually is needed. Less shock and awe. Number 5, and might be the most important, for the same reason I just said about TNA. Find out what in your company attracts the casual audience and utilize that. Is it Britt Baker? Put her on TV. Is it MJF? Put it back in the world title picture. Is it not Adam Cole? Don't utilize him. Find out, do some market research. What would attract the casual audience? Stop booking only for the sickos, because that's why your company's failing. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. Do some market research. Find out what attracts the casual wrestling audience and use that. Utilize that. Do some market research, dude. It's not that hard. So those are the 5 things that I believe Tony Khan can do that would fix his program. And so we're going to end the show with a react to that, just like we always do on Friday. And today's react to that is one simple tweet from Cultaholic, the source being Wrestling Observer Radio. It's Dave Meltzer. I'm going to read the tweet. It is reportedly believed by those close to the situation that WWE will end up owning TNA while blocking AEW from international TV deals. Here's the quote from Dave Meltzer. Quote, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be a part of this deal, but the key stuff is they want to get TNA on those television outlets that WWE is leaving. I'm sure India being the big one. So AEW doesn't get those television outlets that they're leaving. Because of all their shows are on Netflix internationally, they can't put those on. They can't put anything on those stations. So they want to make sure it's not AEW on those stations. So that's one of the many reasons that they're doing this TNA partnership. I know people who are close to the situation that think it will end up with WWE owning TNA. Others think it's going to be a disaster because it always is at the end. Every company WWE works with always ends up worse off. End quote. So, dear Dave Meltzer and dear IWC and dear audience listening to this podcast, take whatever you just heard being quoted from Dave Meltzer, and I need you to find the biggest grain of salt on the planet and take it with that grain of salt. Because Dave Meltzer repeatedly is wrong. Anytime I see something that comes out, and there's 2 sources that I take with the biggest grain of salt. Because I don't know if you've been following the drama online. I wish I wasn't, and I wish I hadn't been sucked into this and seeing this on my timeline on X. But like Sean Ross Sapp's being a pussy again, and crying because someone said someone sourced Fightful for saying something that was then had to be retracted. So Sean Ross Sapp said it made him look bad. Sean, you're gonna get mad at the dude who reported what your company said? My guy, come on. Anyway, that's my take on that. But anytime Fightful is credited with anything as a source, or anytime a Wrestling Observer, so Sean Ross Sapp or anyone at Fightful, or Dave Meltzer, Brian Alvarez, anytime they're credited with being the source, I don't believe you until it happens. But we're going to play devil's advocate. And we're going to assume that this is true. But before we get to that, let me tell you why I don't think it's true. Here's why I don't think this is true. First off, I don't know if you know this, but the United States has antitrust laws. Basically meaning that WWE can't have a monopoly on the industry. So acquiring, and there's laws against acquiring companies too fast. Right? So TKO Endeavor just acquired WWE. So TKO or Endeavor probably isn't looking to acquire Anthem Sports, which owns TNA. Here's why. It probably isn't going to pass. Because I don't know if you guys understand the process in business acquisitions, whether it's a sell or a merge. I don't think you understand the process. That's a long process, and it's got to go through the FCC, and it's got to get approved, and they got to make sure there is no antitrust monopolizing going on in the industry. And I promise you, because WWE just settled with MLW on this very same issue, because MLW sued WWE for $10 million. It ended up making 20 because WWE just wanted to make sure that it settled and it didn't go to Discovery, because they didn't want. Who knows what could have been found out if it went to Discovery on the plans to maybe WWE wants to monopolize. Like, I'm not saying they don't, but I don't think this is right. Okay, here's why. It would benefit nobody. Like, I don't think people understand how Endeavor operates. Endeavor doesn't want to spend more money to pay more wrestlers. There's no reason that they would either merge or buy TNA at this moment. I think could the partnership help get TNA on these foreign markets and give them more exposure? Sure. How is that a bad thing? TNA being on an international TV market is not a bad thing. If at the end of this deal with Fox, if WWE says, "Hey, we're moving SmackDown to Netflix," and hey, Peacock, we're moving, we're moving Peacock, or not Fox, excuse me, with NBC, because they're on USA now. At the end of this USA Peacock deal, right? If WWE says, "Hey, we're moving all of our main roster stuff, we're going to move our main roster stuff to Netflix. All the pay-per-views, SmackDown and Raw are all going to be on Netflix. But here's what we want from you, NBC. Can you offer TNA something? Let's get them on USA. They can take that spot on Thursday, but make it on Thursday night. And all the people who already have Peacock for WWE pay-per-views, we could convince them to keep it for TNA pay-per-views. And we could try to convince them to watch TNA on USA. Because let me tell you something, guys. Let me tell you something. If TNA got a wrestling show on national broadcast TV, like on a channel that most networks can get, and not an access TV, if it ended up on like USA, I would watch that shit. And if their pay-per-views were on Peacock and I didn't have to get a new app, I would watch that shit. And if Peacock and if TNA part of this partnership is, hey, we'll pay you for your network, or we'll pay you for your You know, how about this? As part of the Peacock pay-per-view deal with TNA, you guys, to replace the library of stuff that we lost from WWE, we'll replace it with TNA, and you can cancel TNA Plus, and you don't have to run the servers, and you don't have to do all of that. We'll pay you to have that library while you use Peacock as your host. How is that a bad thing for the business if that ends up being the final result? It's not bad. You know, I mentioned Junkyard James. He called in his podcast yesterday that this is a toxic takeover. And that is the biggest amount of fear porn and narrative pushing I have ever heard in my life. This isn't a toxic takeover. This is how partnerships are supposed to work, right? Because was it not toxic when Kenny Omega and Christian Cage stole your title, left your entire company in limbo because they wanted to put the TNA title on AEW television, and the only people that benefited in the long run from that partnership is AEW. But TNA partners with WWE, and they get big crowds. They're live for the first time in forever, in 8 years. They have full, like 6,000 seat arenas full. They're going to get exposure on a national, global market at times. If Joe Hendry shows up at the Royal Rumble, you don't think that doesn't benefit TNA? And in the end, the big name stars like Jordynne Grace, they get the exposure with part of this, and then they jump ship to WWE. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because like I've tried to explain last week, everyone's goal is WWE. No one wants to sit in TNA their whole career. No one wants to sit in AEW their whole career. No one wants to sit on the indies. The goal is to do what Roman Reigns is doing right now and working like 30 dates a year. That's the goal. Now, not everyone's going to reach that peak because not everyone's Roman Reigns, but that's the goal. If I was training to be a wrestler, my goal is to run the Roman Reigns schedule. To make it to the point where I'm the most over superstar in the world that I can dictate to WWE what I want to do. And I want to run Mania, SummerSlam, Rumble Mania, SummerSlam, and War Games. And those are the only events that I want to run. Maybe the 2 Saudi shows. So I'll run 6 of your shows and of your PLEs. And I'll run maybe I'll run like a month lead up to it. So you have to build a story around my dates that I want to run, but I'm not running 300 days a year. Most wrestlers want to get to a place where they don't have to work 300 days a year. That should be the goal, dude. I don't know how you can hate WWE for signing Jordynne Grace when this is Jordynne Grace's dream. You don't think she didn't spend years working on her career, on her craft, and crafting her body like a sculpture, being a bodybuilder? You don't think she did all of that you think she did all of that to stay in TNA, where no one's watching the product because it's on Access TV? No. She did all of that because she knew that's what it would take to get her to WWE. And it worked. It paid off. All the hard nights of people saying that Jordynne Grace didn't look feminine enough. And I'm guilty of saying that as well, because I do believe when she bulked up for bodybuilding, she didn't look super feminine. And I don't think that's a bad thing to say. But all the hard work, all the critiques, all of the, I'm sure the thoughts of, you don't have to do this, right? To transform her body into quite literally a sculpture. And it paid off. And you're going to hate WWE for signing her and giving her the ability to, and the opportunity to live out her dream that she spent all this hard work to get to. That's a slap in the face to Jordynne Grace to call this a toxic takeover. Because, guys, maybe that's how Vince ran the territories. And maybe that's how Vince ran it in the 80s. And maybe that's how Vince ran it in the 90s. But that's not how Endeavor's running this. That's not how Triple H is running this. It's a new regime. And what this really comes down to, is that there's a faction of the AEW fan base that when they hear WWE, they still think Vincent Kennedy McMahon. And they have an animus towards Vincent Kennedy McMahon for whatever reason that they can't get over. And it's not that they hate WWE, it's that they don't like Vince McMahon. And they equate the two together. And sure, Vince McMahon did some pretty bad things as a person, as a business owner, but it's a new regime in charge. And they're doing pretty good things right now. And I don't think it's fair to judge the new regime based on the sins of the old one. That's not fair. It's not fair at all. I think Triple H cares about the health of this industry, which is why he has multiple developmental ways, right? Tony Khan has 0 programs set to develop wrestlers to benefit not just in the industry, but in life after. All Tony Khan's goal is to buy wrestlers. Hey, I'm going to offer you more than anyone else can do. I may not use you. You could run the indies. I may not use you on the big show. You may not get right. No. Guys, Triple H cares about the future of this industry. So he sets up WWE ID to help these independent talents not just become the best wrestler in the business and the best entertainer in the business, but how to solve problems that may affect them, right? Because a lot of these wrestlers who are in the industry and running the indies, they don't have any help or opportunity to clear their wrongs that they may have done in life, right? Someone like a Jacob Fatu who screwed up as a youngin and ended up in jail. And now Triple H is helping him figure out a way to fix that and to amend for that and to become a better citizen of the nation he lives in. And if y'all don't see that, that's a you problem. Because you're so blinded by hate for WWE because they're the big bad Fed that you don't even see the good that Triple H is doing. And I give Triple H shit for his booking. But you don't see the good that WWE is doing with NIL, where they're taking athletes who busted their wasted, I'm not going to say wasted, but sacrificed their teenage high school years, most of them. Someone like a Jada Parker who grinded in high school to get a scholarship to play soccer at LSU. Someone like Sol Ruka who grinded to get a scholarship in a sport like gymnastics at the University of Oregon. Who didn't really have much of a future in that sport because there's not a lot of pathway in that sport after college. If you don't make the Olympics, the collegiate level is about as far as you go. Someone like Kalani Jordynne or Bianca Belair who ran track. And they take these superstars and these star athletes at these top tier programs. And they give them an opportunity to work for the biggest company in the industry. And Bianca's made a star out of herself. And Sol Ruka's made a star out of herself. And Jada Parker has the potential to be a superstar. And they've built the future of the business. But AEW fans don't see that because they see toxic takeover. Now, because they form a partnership with TNA? Come on, dude. Come on. Dave Meltzer doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Come on, dude. Y'all really gonna believe Dave Meltzer? Guys, when it comes to Fightful and Wrestling Observer reporting on WWE, I'm 97.5%. That's a random number, I know. But the point is, I'm pretty certain that there are people in WWE that Triple H has that when they answer the phone and they say, oh, man, Dave's calling again. Let me answer this. And they feed Dave false information. Oh, man. Sean again. Sean Ross Simp is on the phone again. Fightful's on the phone again. How's it going? And they feed him false information. Like this whole thing with like Alexa Bliss's plans being scripted or being removed. I mean, it could be true, but I believe it's false information because what happens is these dirt sheets try to report things, and to make them look less credible, they feed them false information. I believe Alexa Bliss shows up at the Royal Rumble. I do. Maybe it is a contract thing, but I'm gonna tell you what, they're gonna fix that shit real quickly. I think Alexa Bliss got to push as soon as she gets back, in some way, shape, or form. I think Alexa Bliss having a push against like a Chelsea Green for that title would be a really good storyline and would bring a level of prestige to the title right out the gate. I thoroughly believe that. Right. All right. I've ranted enough. Let's just end it this way. Y'all be hating. And it's crazy. It's crazy that you hate this much on a company, right? And I'm going to use the same line AEW fans use at me. If you don't enjoy it, don't watch it. Cool. If you don't like WWE, that's a you problem. That's a you problem. It's a new regime. This isn't a toxic takeover. Dave Meltzer doesn't know what he's talking about. If TNA gets exposure and gets put on foreign TV networks because of this partnership, that's not TNA's problem. It's not WWE's problem. It's AEW's problem because you have the ability to try to do new contracts with big companies, but you decide to stay with ITV. That was your problem. WWE's not blocking you from nothing. They're partnering with the company, and they're doing it to give exposure to a brand that knows their role and helps develop future superstars. And WWE, as much as people say we're trying to do a toxic takeover of the industry and it's going to kill no, guys, they have systems in place now. They have systems in place now with NIL, with WWE ID, with its partnership with TNA. There's a threefold way. There's a threefold path now how to get into NXT. If you're an indie star that's young and WWE believes in you, but you just need some development and we're going to train you in our style while you're young before you make all the bad mistakes and learn all the bad habits, we're going to train you. Someone like a Zeta Steele, which could be a superstar in the women's division when she's fully trained and gets that exposure. And we're going to give you social media exposure. And we're going to give you life lessons to just benefit you, to even if this program doesn't work for you, because it's not going to work for everybody, but you'll at least get something, right? You may not become the next superstar, but you'll learn how to be a superstar in your kid's life and in your family's life. And that's what they're teaching in WWE ID, right? And if you're an indie star, you're going to develop that way. And if you're a college athlete that may not see a pathway in the NFL as a football player, or someone like Obafemi who did track and field, I think he was shot put, who had no future. He didn't make the Olympic team. He had no path in that sport, but he's an athletic beast who came in through the NIL system, through the PC, and is now the NXT World Champion in less than 2 years. One of the biggest names in NXT, one of the biggest potential ceilings I've seen in a superstar ever. One of the quickest rises, right? Trick Williams, same way, signed on an NFL practice squad, but gets cut. Really no chance to make the league if you get cut from a practice squad. So he comes and trains at the PC and becomes one of the biggest names in the business. You can't tell me the track record of WWE developing future stars for this business doesn't work. I'm sorry. But you can't. When Tony Khan has zero developmental strategy to develop the future of his business, here's what Tony Khan does. He leeches off of the work of everyone else. He finds fully trained wrestlers and he pays them big money and he sucks that company dry and he sucks New Japan dry. Basically, by creating the Continental Classic, makes the G1 completely useless. Wrestle Kingdom used to be 2 nights of displaying the best of Japanese wrestling, but now you have 1 night of Wrestle Kingdom, and then you do Wrestle Dynasty or whatever the hell it's called, and AEW takes over that. You want to talk about a leech to the industry? Maybe it's the kid playing in the sandbox that doesn't know what the hell he's doing, has 0 developmental strategy, refuses to build a performance center to allow his talent to work on their matches during the week. And then you're going to tell me Tony Khan cares about the business? You know, he cares about his money, buying superstars, paying absurd amounts of money, not making money, but spending money. And he cares that he gets to live out his childhood fantasy. And when AEW dies, the unfortunate death, because I don't want it to die, when AEW dies in 5 to 10 years, when it dies, it's all Tony Khan's fault. And the fans will blame the toxic takeover that doesn't exist. But it's Tony Khan's fault because he refused to build the future. His main event scene right now has like the average age of like 57. Fuck, he got Jeff Jarrett in the main event. He refuses to build the future. That's Tony Khan's fault. It's not WWE's. It's not some toxic takeover. No. Simply Anthony Khan. And that's what we'll end it. Thank y'all for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Share with an AEW fan. Let him hear that rant. But I'll end with that. Y'all have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Slap and Meat Wrestling Podcast.
So hit that subscribe, come along for the ride. AEW, WE, we're always on side. From fantasy booking to baddies that slay. Slap and Meat Wrestling every Tuesday.